A new kind of evolution in action in Australia. Hi there, I'm Jeff, and thanks for joining us for Plain English lesson number 340. JR is the producer, and he has posted the full lesson at plainenglish.com/340. The full lesson, remember, includes the transcript, translations of keywords into 9 languages, the audio at 2 speeds, a video lesson, and 1 extra word or phrase from today's topic, all for you at plainenglish.com/340. Coming up today, the cane toad is an invasive species in Australia. It has no natural predators there, and it kills the animals that try to eat it. But there is one fascinating thing about this toad. Some of them are evolving far faster than normal evolution would suggest. We'll explore what's happening and how on today's lesson. Our expression is pick up, and we have a quote of the week. Now, by the way, before we start, a toad is a kind of frog, usually brown, with drier skin and bumps all over its body. So he is going to be the topic of today's lesson, the cane toad in Australia. Species change over time. It's a fascinating part of nature. Unfortunately for curious humans, though, these changes happen so slowly that it's impossible for any of us to observe them in our own lifetimes. Changes to animal species happen over dozens, hundreds, or thousands of generations, and hundreds, thousands, or millions of years. However, a strange thing is happening in Australia. The cane toad, a despised species down under, is changing much more quickly than other species evolve. In fact, the evolution is playing out at a high speed. I'll tell you about that in a second, but first, let's meet this species. In 1934, Australian sugar cane farmers were battling a pernicious species of beetle. The beetles were eating their sugar cane stalks. So, they found a kind of toad in Hawaii that eats this exact kind of beetle, a match made in heaven from the perspective of the farmers. They brought 102 toads from Hawaii to Australia, bred them in captivity, and eventually released 2,400 toads into the sugarcane farms. They watched in horror as their experiment not only failed to control the sugarcane beetles, but proceeded to destroy wildlife all over their country. You see, the beetles were munching on sugarcane high on the stalk, but the toads didn't jump high enough to eat the beetles. Instead, the toads ate other things on the ground. Very well, other animals must eat this toad, right? Indeed they do. The cane toad is ugly to us, but looks delicious to Australian animals. Unfortunately, the cane toad is also poisonous. It releases a deadly serum when it's in trouble. So the animals that eat the cane toad also die. Crocodiles, turtles, other reptiles, some mammals, and even some birds all try eating the cane toad, and many die. Some native Australian species are in danger of extinction as a result. The cane toad does have natural predators, just not in Australia. That's a problem when an individual toad can lay 30,000 eggs a year. In fact, the cane toad population has grown to over 200 million since 1934. The cane toads are on the move. They were introduced to a small area in northern Queensland in 1935. They moved slowly at first, but their spread picked up. They began moving up and down the coastline in the 1940s and 1950s and started pushing farther inland in the 1970s and 1980s. They now cover large parts of northern and eastern Australia. In the early days, they were advancing slowly. By 1994, though, they were conquering new territory at a rate of 40 kilometers or 25 miles a year. 20 years later, they were conquering new territory even faster, now 60 kilometers or 37 miles per year. Think about that. In the space of 20 years, the blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, in just 20 years, the toads were jumping and spreading 50% faster. How is that possible? Scientists call the toads near the edges of the population. They call them the frontier toads. These are the ones that are pushing the frontier or the border of the species into new territory. And guess what? These toads along the frontier have stronger back legs and they jump straighter than the toads that are living in areas where the toad population is more well established. It's almost as if evolution is on fast forward just for these toads on the frontier. This is unusual. If you look at the population of a single species, there will be natural variation from animal to animal, but big differences in characteristics, the structure of bones and muscles and such, won't be much different from place to place. A whole population tends to evolve together, at least in the short run. Now, sure, over millions of years, species branch off and adapt. The population in one place will change differently than the population in another, but that's over the long run. The cane toad is changing quickly. So here's what scientists think is happening. Picture a population of cane toads. Some toads will have genes that make them jump farther and straighter. Others won't jump as far, or they'll jump around in circles and stay in the same general area. The ones that jump straight and far will be the ones to push the frontier deeper into Australia. Now, when it comes to mate, those toads near the frontier will find partners nearby, partners that are just like them, long, straight jumpers. So guess what happens to the offspring of the toads at the frontier? This new generation is the product of two parents that are long, straight jumpers. So this new generation will naturally be a little stronger and jump a little straighter. Out of this new generation of strong, straight jumpers, some will be stronger than others. These strongest ones, the strongest of a strong set of parents, these ones will push the frontier farther still, mate with one another, and pass along the strongest genes. The same thing happens with each successive generation at the frontier, and that's how this one species is evolving at a high speed to push deeper and deeper into Australia, and that's why the toads at the edges of the population are different from the lazy ones that stay close to home. Now, this isn't exactly Darwin's natural selection, but it's close. In natural selection, the individuals with the strongest characteristics reproduce more often so that the offspring have the most favorable characteristics to survive and continue mating. That's evolution of a whole population over time. What's happening with the cane toad is more like evolution over space rather than over long periods of time. The ironic thing for the cane toads at the frontier is that jumping farther and straighter doesn't confer a survival advantage. If anything, it's the opposite. More of the toads on the frontier suffer from arthritis from jumping so far, and they may even be eaten more often. A few years back, we talked about a new effort to genetically modify mosquitoes so that they stop reproducing. The point would be to control the spread of malaria. Scientists are working on a way to do that with these cane toads, but it's not easy. Invasive species are scary. The cane toad is a big deal in Australia. Here in the US, we have the Asian carp, a kind of fish that is just demolishing rivers. It doesn't help either that both of these invasive species are really ugly. Today's expression is to pick up. There are several ways to use this phrasal verb, but as usual, we're going to concentrate on just one way today. In this sense, pick up means to increase in strength or speed. The wind is starting to pick up. That's a common thing to say when you're outside and the wind is starting to blow harder or faster. If you're out playing golf, you'll want to pay close attention to the wind. When the wind starts to pick up, it can affect the trajectory of the balls you hit. The cane toad in Australia is spreading. At first, the toad population spread slowly, but gradually the spread started to pick up. The spread started to happen faster. The spread started to pick up because of a peculiar type of evolution along the frontier. It's snowy here in Chicago. We had a big snowstorm a few weeks ago. When it first starts snowing, just a few flurries fall. You see them blowing around, but it doesn't stick to the ground, and it's still safe to be out driving. But when the snowfall starts to pick up, That's when you need to be off the roads. When the snow starts falling harder and faster, you want to be off the roads if you can. You can say it with rain too. If it's just drizzling, you can be out with just a light jacket. But if the rain starts to pick up, you'll want to be carrying an umbrella. If the rain starts to come down stronger, then you'll want that umbrella and not just a light jacket. You can say pick up speed if you want to say go faster. I drove a moving truck from New York to Chicago. I think I mentioned that once before. A big yellow Penske moving truck. As I was driving on the Ohio Turnpike, just west of Cleveland, Ohio, I ran into a problem. I couldn't pick up any speed. I'd press the gas pedal and the truck would move slowly. I pulled over to the side of the highway in this truck with all my worldly possessions in the back. I tried to get going, but the truck just could not pick up any speed, so I couldn't get back onto the highway. I had to call the rental company. They found a hose had broken off in the engine, and that explained why I couldn't pick up any speed. They fixed it, and I was on my way. Pick up the pace is a funny expression in English. It means go faster. We need to pick up the pace here. If someone ever says that to you, let's pick up the pace here, that person is telling you to go faster. Whatever you're doing, do it faster. Joe Biden is trying to get a coronavirus relief bill passed in Congress. Our legislature is famous for moving slowly. It was built to move slowly. But the White House is in no mood to wait. They're telling Congress to pick up the pace, move quicker. If you're waiting for a vaccine in Europe, you might wish that they would pick up the pace. The continent was so instrumental in developing and then manufacturing the vaccine, and guess what? The shots are not getting into people's arms fast enough. Europe really needs to pick up the pace. Here's a quote of the week. I mentioned earlier that scientists are working on a way to genetically modify cane toads to stop their spread, or at least make them less poisonous. Whenever you talk about genetically modifying animals, one concern that comes up is that it's not the place of humans to play God with nature, and that is a valid concern. The other side of that argument, though, is that humans have been playing God for a long time, just in other ways. The cane toad came to Australia in an experiment, taking an animal from one part of the world and introducing it to another, all for the purposes of eating yet another kind of creature. So all that is an introduction to the quote of the week. It's from Stuart Brand. He said, "We are as gods, and we might as well get good at it." The argument for genetically modifying the toad is to correct a mistake that people playing God in a less enlightened time made. Food for thought. Stuart Brand says, "We are as gods, and we might as well get good at it." And that's all today. Congratulations on making it through another Plain English audio lesson. Remember, there are always more parts of the lesson to explore on the website. The full lesson is at plainenglish.com/340. And if you're ready to pick up the pace in English, you can listen to the fast version of this lesson. And when I say the fast version, I don't just speed up the audio electronically. It's a whole new recording, and I read the text just the way I would speak it to a friend. So if you listen to the fast version, you're hearing exactly the way I would normally say those words. It's great if you're trying to take that next step with your listening, and that's available for Plus members. If you're not yet a Plus member, you can join by visiting plainenglish.com/plus. Now, we'll be back on Thursday. I need a break from doing scientific research. This lesson was hard. So on Thursday, I'll tell you about some famous regional chain restaurants in the United States and what they offer. Now, sure, we all know about McDonald's and Subway and the national or global fast food restaurants. But within regions, we have some local favorites. So I'll tell you about those coming up on Thursday. See you then.